Welcome to CX Today with me, David Dungay. I'm joined today by Alex Black from Enghouse. Welcome to the show, Alex. How are you?
I'm good, David. Thanks. Long time no speak. How are you doing?
I'm brilliant, thank you. But I am even more brilliant because of today's discussion. We're going to be talking about customer experience in the Metaverse. The Metaverse is a huge trending topic right now. Everyone's trying to work out what it means for them, for their business, maybe even for their, their home life and how they interact with their friends and family. But before we get into that conversation, can you give us a quick introduction to Enghouse and yourself?
Okay, so I'm Alex. I'm the CTO of Enghouse Interactive. We're a company who specialise in creating software to help our customers maximise the value of any interactions with their customers. Be it contact centre, self-service platforms, attendant consoles. Those are the kinds of platforms we provide.
Fantastic. So the Metaverse, it's the word Metaverse hit our vocabulary sort of over the last year.
Yeah.
I think it's really since Mr. Zuckerberg made his announcement back in last summer.
Yeah.
But what does that mean to you?
I think from my point of view, I'm older than you, so I will remember the concept of Second Life. Second Life back 2006-ish, 2005, 2006, that kind of time frame, which was in effect a metaverse. And Second Life was one of those things. It was a virtual world. You kind of took part in this virtual world, and it was because the internet was kind of beginning to really push forward at that time. Second Life became very, very hyped, and it went through this enormous growth curve, and it kind of seemed to swallow up a lot of things. And I worked for a carrier at the time, and naturally it was of interest to us to be part of that. So we in quotes immersed ourselves into Second Life, and it was fantastic actually. You had lots of big brands like Cisco, ourselves at KCOM, lots of big companies taking part in this world, and you lived in the digital domain. Obviously outside of work, and for some people it was inside of work as well. But you kind of lived in that world, and one of the things that was most striking for me about that was I actually attended a recruitment fair. People were trying to. It was a vehicle it was one of these things that it was an experiment to see how could we use things like Second Life, and there was a recruitment fair organised, and as I say, all those big brands were there, and it had its own currency. The London dollar, I think, was the currency we used, and there were a couple of brands who really, really kind of immersed themselves into it, and one of them was Domino's. And it was really funny in this recruitment fair. You'd put your money in the slot, your London dollars, and the doorbell would ring 20 minutes later with a Domino's pizza around. It was quite a thing, and to me, that's what the metaverse is about. It's in the world, I've kind of found, and maybe that's because I'm getting old now, kind of found that there's actually not always a lot of new things, but a lot of stuff gets reinvented as technology moves along to be able to support that. In 2006, the concept of virtual reality headsets, yes, in the labs of MIT, and I was very privileged to work with them, that they had those kinds of things, and they had the big video walls and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't something for the populace at that point. So, but that's what to me what the metaverse means. It's really a new generation, if you like, of what Second Life was trying to be. And what Second Life kind of became, and then, unfortunately, it kind of plummeted. And it's still around, I think. I do believe it's still around, but it's not got that kind of cachet it did, 15 years ago. So, there you go.
Yeah. So pizzas in the Second Life. I like it. Well, I'm glad to hear you didn't buy those pizzas with Bitcoin, because we could have been having a different conversation right now. So, okay, well, let's talk about the metaverse today. Then, I mean, is the metaverse a valid channel then today for brands to interact with their customers? Yeah,
I think people are very individual. You know, you've got extremes, very polar extremes of different personalities, different preferences. And there will be people, you know, back then with Second Life, I think one of the things we might want to do is learn from some of the things back then. Maybe I should reinvent myself as a metaverse consultant, having been there, at least for a very short time. But yes, I do think it's a valid channel, because there will be people who will take part in the metaverse, and will be people who will commit themselves to that environment. And as a result of that, it will become a valid communication channel, a valid interaction channel for that community. And I think the key thing I always say is when you implement any new technology, I believe there's a 4-stage process, a real simple 4-stage process you need to go through to do it well. It's not the only one, but it's one I've used most of my life. And it's called SPRO, strategy. What is your strategy? Process. What process do you need to drive the strategy? Resources. What resources do you need to make that process work? And then how best organize those. So simple 4-stage process. When it comes to strategy, key thing in any strategy around customer interaction is understand your customer. Who is it you're targeting? Because, you know, if you're a certain type of company, you might not be a valid, those people might not be valid targets for you. So you really need to understand what your strategy is, and then really get to grips with what are the preferences of those people that fit you and that you're targeting. If you don't understand those preferences, you might hit them, or you might miss. But you really need to understand how they want to interact. And for some people, communication in the metaverse, not through the metaverse, but in the metaverse, is going to be what they want to do. And therefore, back to my example of Domino's in Second Life, therefore there will be brands who will be able to target those people. Do the preparation, get the strategy right, and you'll be able to target them well. And it could become a very, very successful segment for you. But you really need to do the homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you spoke about, you know, potentially reinventing yourself as a consultant for the metaverse. What about those brands? What about those brands who might want to reinvent themselves? Does the metaverse offer opportunity for those companies that want to do that sort of brand reinvention, if you like?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about reinvention. I think what it can do is it can provide opportunities for companies to engage differently and to engage with new audiences. I'm not sure it gives you the opportunity to completely reinvent yourself. And one of the reasons for that is that you need to have integrity. You know, if you just move into something new, specifically because it's new and shiny, and you think, I'm going to try and exploit that. Today's consumers are pretty sophisticated, and they will see through that. So you have to have integrity and you have to have transparency. Yeah. But I do think that it will give you the opportunity to engage with audiences. And the closer those audiences are to the ones you already deal with, then the more likely you are to be successful. But it doesn't preclude you from going into new audiences. But I'm not sure about pure reinvention. I do think there is one thing, back to the integrity and transparency issue, is if this is being created by people purely for tracking and exploitation purposes, I think that potentially will lead to some problems. It could be problematic. If there's a bit more transparency in it and a bit more openness, then I do think that the metaverse could be, or there will be more than one metaverse, but the whole concept of the metaverse could be very powerful, especially for certain types of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what you're alluding to there, I think a lot of people share that concern when it comes to who's building the metaverse right now. Obviously, not just one company involved, but several companies, which will hopefully give us a bit more transparency in the space. So I want to talk about more specifically about the contact center and CX space. You know, what does the metaverse mean for contact center and CX generally?
I think as we talked earlier, the metaverse is a valid engagement channel for a community, yeah, and it will be there. But I do think in order to be transparent and have integrity, I think companies really need to fully immerse themselves in the metaverse to be taken seriously. I think the sophisticated consumer will see through if they don't. I think in terms of what that means, we talked about strategy, identify your customer. Now we need to look at process. What is the process of engaging and interacting with people in the metaverse? I think that's something that you really need to understand, because without understanding the process, and it will evolve, processes will change. Without understanding the process, you're not likely to be successful. So strategy, identify the customers, process, work out what that process is, and then think about the resources. If you look at any communication channel, there are different types of people who are best suited to working in that channel. And it will be exactly the same in the concept of the metaverse. There will be some people who are really, really good at interacting in that world, and some people who are not. So I think get your process right, then think about your resources and work out who are your people who should really be driving and working in that channel for you. And they have to be immersed. It's no good having a foot in either camp. You can't sit in the real world half the time and be in the metaverse half the time and pretend. You can't do that. I do believe you're going to have to be, and companies will have to be fully immersed in that. And I think that's where Domino's, that example I gave earlier, Domino's did a really good job back then of becoming, of branding themselves really, really well in that community. And if you think about it, a lot of the community was they had certain characteristics that pizzas and Coke went with, the programming community at the time. So I think you need to get your people and make sure they're the right people to work in that domain. Yeah, but I think it will be the digital channel. I think most of the interaction will be in the digital domain. There may be some voice in there, because voice is one of these things that people have been trying to kill forever, but it's never going to go away. I don't know yet. I think we have to wait and see. I don't know how prevalent it will be in the metaverse, but I do think the digital channels, particularly chat, are probably going to be very prevalent there. Most companies have that capability today. Now they just need to look at extending that and understand the process in a different world. And I think that's what it means.
Yeah. Okay. So you spoke about full immersion there. Typically, we associate VR with with that full immersion, if you like.
Yeah.
Are customers are they ready for VR interactions yet?
I think some people are. I think there are some communities today who have lived in the gaming community, for example. The gaming community is a very, very valid community, without question. They have adopted VR, virtual reality, much more readily than just about any other community. And therefore, there are some communities who are adopting and are ready for that VR interaction today. And I think, you look at who's been buying the technology, who's been implementing the technology, the gaming side is key. However, for most people, I think it's a big step in the distance to get to full VR. I think for many people, augmented reality might be something that's far more approachable in the short term. And we're seeing, companies implement technology that make augmented reality much more realistic. Look at IKEA. Apple has done a lot of work in popularizing or making it approachable in terms of their phones. Their phones now have got augmented reality capability, and people like IKEA, you can go and show a bit of your living room and see how a new sofa would look in there. So I think that technology is probably, for the most part, going to be much more approachable to many than virtual reality. Yeah. So, but through time, things will change, and I think VR for some people will become more predominant. But I do think augmented reality is probably going to be there. Retail, as you mentioned with the IKEA example, another one in the area of field service technicians in a contact centre helping a customer, and being able to overlay instructions and things like that and pointers on the customer's phone based on what they're looking at to help a customer resolve a problem. I think there's a couple of domains where augmented reality today will add a huge amount, and in terms of the contact centre, that could be very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you're right. And gaming particularly could be a massive on-ramp to this world for getting people into this sort of space as a retail. Another one potentially as well. Let's talk about Enghouse. Let's talk about Enghouse specifically. I mean, what are you doing at the moment to prepare for the incoming metaverse?
Well, I think any technology company, you have to look at what the potential impact of any technology is, even if it's down the road, and that's obviously something we're looking at. I'm a firm believer that you need to experiment with technology to understand the process impact that it's going to have on what you do, and in our case, that's about customer interaction. So we need to look at the technology to understand how it's going to impact that. And actually, the guy who heads up our contact center product management team, he's got his Oculus headset, which he's acquired not long ago, and he's kind of sitting there trying to experiment and work out what that means. Because the key thing, as I mentioned earlier, it's about process. Process is hugely important. And if you don't start to experiment with it, you won't understand the process. Many years ago, in fact, 2000, I did a keynote presentation at a big finance conference, and it was about the impact of mobility on banking. And WAP was the technology that was in the mobile handset that had just come out. And one of the things I talked about then was WAP isn't the final technology we're going to use, and it's actually pretty rubbish. But don't write it off. It's a stepping stone that you can use to understand the process that you're going to have to look at. And I think the same where we are today is we need to understand what the process is. And I know I keep rabbiting on about process, but it's hugely important. Because if you get that right, then you will engage properly with your customer. So that's what we are doing to get ready for this happening.
Okay, so we're coming towards the end of the conversation now, Alex.
Oh, that's a shame.
I'd like to bring things. I'd like to bring things back to the current universe, if you like. It's coming out of a pandemic, or at least it feels like we are in the UK. Yeah. I know different countries are in different stages, but tell me a little bit about what's Enghouse doing to help customers cope with this stage of the pandemic, or just coming out of that realm, if you like.
I think one of the things I've learned over the years is that every societal event, call it what you will, that comes along does have a lasting change. Traditionally those have been recessions. When a recession comes along, it typically will leave a lasting change on how people think and how people behave. The pandemic will do the same. Yeah, it will do the same. Consumers will see things differently and they will behave differently as a result. We work very closely with Steve at Contact Babel, and they do a lot of research to understand the customer and what the customer wants. And one of the things that he's just done a survey second half of last year, and one of the things that's kind of come out is naturally there is a shift to digital. The digital channel is definitely becoming more adopted. That's been going on for years. It did go through a little blip, maybe 2-3 years ago, where voice had a bit of resurgence, but we're seeing digital go through. But the other thing is, and this was quite an interesting one, is that people seem to be changing their preferences for the channel based on the situation they find themselves in. So they're no longer dogmatic about one channel. I'm only going to use this. People are now changing the channel to suit the situation they find themselves in. So what that kind of means is that you need to create your contact centre and your agents need to be able to interact with those customers over the channel they want to at that time. So it's no longer just their preferred channel. It's their preferred channel for that moment. So you need to be flexible enough to do that. And something else that I think we see in everyday life that's happening as a result of this, people have become incredibly demanding. Tempers have shortened. People are definitely becoming a bit more assertive in things. So therefore, you have to not only be able to get the right channel at the right time, but you also have to make sure you have the right people to deal with the particular frame of mind that the customer may be in. And back to my earlier, process resource, you need to get the right people to be able to handle that. And then you need to back them up with software that allows them to have a good view of that customer in real time. And in those kinds of areas, so you need to be, omni-channel has to be taken as read, because if the customer's switching channel more readily and based on the situation, you need to have a view of how that customer's interacted with you over all the other channels. But because you've got the more demanding customer who may have a shorter temper, they may be very abrupt these days in comparison. And I'm not trying to overgeneralize and throw everybody into the same bucket of becoming raging lunatics. But people have changed, and you see it in society. So therefore, one of the things that we look at as well is we have some technology that allows you to coach the agent in real time, particularly if it's a voice interaction. You can coach the agent in real time so that you can tell if the customer's stressed. You can tell if the agent's stressed. You can tell if there's crosstalk and guide the agent through the interaction. I think those kinds of technologies are becoming more prevalent in this kind of world where people are changing channel and people are, being a bit more particular about how they interact. So I think, we, from our point of view, it kind of plays to some of our strengths around what we've always done, really.
Fantastic. Well, Alex, it's been really fascinating speaking to you today. And maybe one of our future interactions might even be in the metaverse, and I look forward to that.
And I'll send you a Domino's pizza.
Fantastic. Okay, well, look, that's all we've got time for, unfortunately. Thank you to Alex, and thank you for watching. You've been watching me, David Dungay, on CX Today. If you like today's conversation, please give us a like and a share on social media. That's it from me. I'll see you next time.